Carrot here with a little warning for Canadians. I just read a Gallup poll that indicated that 36% or 35% of Canadians are going to vote for Stephen Harper because of his fiscal policies. You know, the fact that they feel that he would be better at running the country from a fiscal standpoint, and also that he's tough on crime and would be better to control crime. All right, so let's just put a fork in that silly, concept altogether and real quick. Here are only two examples of where Harper could have literally destroyed the economy in Canada and joined the Americans in that, wretched mess that happened in 2007, 2008. Way back when he was in Parliament, and I think it was perhaps it was, it must have been Chrétien was Prime Minister at the time. He stood up in Parliament and said, why aren't we joining the Americans in the, battle in Iraq to, discover weapons of mass destruction, blah, blah, blah. Let's join George Bush, rah, rah, pick up your guns, boys, let's go for it. Our Prime Minister at the time, Chrétien, although no genius, but, pretty okay guy, I guess, you kind of looked at, you could just see from his face and from his actions that, the whole Bush thing didn't fool him for 1 second. He knew damn well there were no weapons of mass destruction, that it was just a ruse for, big war machine in the U.S. to get in there and make more money, perhaps grab some oil. It's kind of a long story. That's maybe for another time. I think there's pretty strong evidence that Cheney was involved in, carving up Iraq for oil riches, etc. Anyway, so that was one thing. So had he been Prime Minister at the time, we would have definitely been in Iraq. We would have blown away not only decent human beings, perhaps women and children, but also we would have lost a lot of our soldiers and a whole crap load of our money. The second thing that Harper did, which again very transparent, very typical of a neocon ultra right-wing mindset, is that I think it might have been the Martin Prime Ministership, and I'm not sure about that. I mean, those are trivial details, really. But he stood up in Parliament and said, why aren't we deregulating our banks like the Americans are, or loosening up the regulations, I guess would be the way they put it. Now, this is in Parliament, stood up, why don't we join the Americans in improving our economy by deregulation? I think anybody who knows the slightest bit about economics right now and the story of the crash of the entire world economy knows that that would have been a massively huge mistake. We would, from a money standpoint, have been in perhaps as bad a position as the Americans, maybe not, I don't know. But deregulation of banks and Wall Street, or Bay Street in our case, definitely was the cause of the huge crash in 2008. And our subsequent miserable, well, actually Canada did quite well because our banks are regulated quite a bit, and so is Bay Street, etc., i.e. / Wall Street type things. Well, we lost money, most of it in Wall Street ventures and such. Anyway, so that's it. Those are two main things that I wanted to bring up. So any Canadians who happen to stumble across this video, or maybe I can post it somewhere where somebody might actually see it, don't for 1 second think that the economy would be better under Harper. The economy would be better under almost anybody else. Something else that remains to be unsaid quite often is that pumping money into banks and cutting taxes on big corporations that are supposed to create jobs is such a losing proposition. Yeah, they'll create more jobs. Typically, if it's a big manufacturer, they'll create more jobs wherever they're cheapest, in India or China. They won't do anything for Canada. The best way, believe it or not, if you haven't heard this before, the best way to increase or improve the economy in Canada is to raise wages. So you do the exact opposite of what the Americans are doing. You don't, cancel minimum wage or whatever. You increase wages. The more people who are making a decent living, the more taxes will be paid into the economy, and the more products will be bought, not on borrowed money, but on real money, etc., etc. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. This is getting a little bit too long. It's Carrot over and out.